Welcome to Fluent Daily, the English channel that tells you the truth about how professional English actually works. Let's get into it.
Every language learner reaches a point where their vocabulary is strong. Their grammar is solid and they can handle almost any conversation. But there is still one territory they avoid: the difficult conversation, the feedback that needs to be delivered, the boundary that needs to be set, the disagreement that cannot be avoided, the relationship problem that has been sitting unspoken for weeks while everyone pretends everything is fine. Difficult conversations in your first language are hard. In your second language, they feel almost impossible. The fear of being misunderstood, of saying something harsher than you meant, or softer than you needed, keeps people silent when they should speak. Today, we change that. 12 techniques, exact phrases, and the specific language that lets you say the necessary thing without damaging the relationship you care about. These are not soft alternatives to the difficult thing. They are the tools that let you say the difficult thing well. Technique 1. Opening a difficult conversation. The opening is everything. How you begin determines whether the conversation becomes a dialogue or a defense. And most people begin badly, not because they are unkind, but because they do not have the right words ready. The wrong openings are the ones everyone knows and fears. "We need to talk" signals alarm and puts the other person immediately on guard before a single real word has been exchanged. "You always" and "you never" are immediately accusatory and almost always inaccurate, which means the conversation gets derailed into a debate about whether the accusation is fair, rather than addressing the real issue. The right opening creates space before it creates pressure. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Is now a good time?" Gives the other person a moment to arrive at the conversation rather than being ambushed by it. And the most powerful opening phrase in any difficult conversation is this one: "I would like to approach this as a conversation, not a confrontation." That single sentence names the dynamic you want before the conversation has had time to become the wrong one. Use it. It works every time. Technique 2. Delivering difficult feedback. The most reliable structure for any feedback conversation is the SBI framework, which stands for situation, behavior, and impact. And the reason it works is that it removes the one thing that derails feedback conversations more than anything else: evaluation. Here's what it looks like. Situation: in yesterday's meeting. Behavior: when you interrupted Sarah twice. Impact: it seemed to affect the dynamic in the room, and Sarah went quiet for the rest of the session. Notice what is absent. There is no "you were rude." There is no "you always do this." There is only what happened and what resulted. And the crucial thing about that structure is that the person receiving the feedback cannot argue with an observation. They can argue with your interpretation of their character. They cannot argue with what you both saw happen and what followed from it. Before you use the SBI framework, the framing matters too. "I want to give you some feedback, and I want to frame it as someone who is on your side." That sentence changes the emotional context of everything that follows. Techniques 3 and 4. Setting boundaries and disagreeing professionally. On boundaries. The most common mistake is over-explaining. People state a boundary and then justify it at such length that it begins to sound provisional, as if the right counterargument might change it. A boundary stated clearly with a brief reason is stronger than the same boundary buried in 3 minutes of explanation. "I am not comfortable with that. I would like to ask you to do this instead." State it, give the reason briefly, and stop. The fuller version, when more context is needed, is this: "When this happens, it affects me in this way. I need this to change." Situation, impact, need. That is the structure on disagreeing professionally. The most important word in professional disagreement is "and," not "but." "I respect that view, but I disagree" erases everything before the "but." The other person only hears the disagreement. "I respect that view," and "I disagree" keeps both things true simultaneously. The respect is real. The disagreement is real. Neither cancels the other. When someone pushes back hard and you are not changing your position, this is the phrase that holds the line without escalating. "I hear you. I am not changing my position on this, but I want to make sure I understand yours. Could you walk me through your thinking?" It shows you have listened. It demonstrates that your position is considered, not stubborn, and it invites the other person to keep talking rather than to dig in. Techniques 5 and 6. Addressing relationship tension and apologizing genuinely. When something has shifted in a relationship and you are not entirely sure what caused it, the softening phrase is essential. I feel like something has shifted between us. I might be reading it wrong, but I wanted to check in. That phrase, I might be reading it wrong, does something important. It gives the other person space to correct a misreading, and it signals that you are approaching this with openness rather than accusation. You are not announcing a problem. You are checking whether there is one. For the genuine apology, there is a phrase that sounds like an apology and is not one. I am sorry if you felt that way. That phrase transfers responsibility to the person who is hurt. It makes their reaction the problem rather than your action. It is not an apology. A genuine apology has 3 parts: what you did, why it mattered, and no deflection. I am sorry. I did this specific thing which caused this specific outcome, and I understand why that affected you the way it did. That is an apology. The other person does not need you to explain yourself. They need to know that you understand what you did and why it mattered. Story time. May and the credit conversation. For 8 months, May had watched the same thing happen in every team meeting. Her colleague presented ideas in ways that did not reflect that they had come from both of them. Not dramatically, just consistently. She had told herself it was not worth raising. She had told herself she was being oversensitive. Finally, she asked for a coffee, and this is what she said. I want to raise something. I am approaching this as a conversation, not a confrontation. I have noticed that in meetings, some ideas I have contributed have been presented in ways that do not reflect that they came from both of us. I do not think it is intentional, but it is affecting how I feel about our collaboration. Her colleague was quiet for a moment. I did not realize I was doing that, he said. You are right. I am sorry. The dynamic changed the following week. She had not exaggerated. She had not accused. She had not rehearsed an argument. She had named what was happening and how it was landing. She had used the opening phrase. She had described behavior and impact without evaluation. She had named the tension without attacking the person. That was enough. Techniques 7 and 8. When the conversation gets heated and delivering bad news. When a conversation gets tense, the natural response is to match the energy or to go silent. Both responses make things worse. The phrase that changes the dynamic is this: I'm not trying to win this, I am trying to understand. That sentence does something remarkable. It names the competitive dynamic that has taken hold of the conversation and withdraws from it unilaterally. And when one person steps back from competition, it almost always brings the other person back to conversation rather than combat. The physical version of this is just as important. Could we slow this down a little? I want to make sure we are both in a place where we can hear each other. That gives both people permission to breathe. On delivering bad news, the instinct is to soften it, to bury the difficult information in careful language that cushions the impact. But bad news delivered clearly, with genuine care for the person receiving it, is almost always received better than bad news buried in softening. You deserve to hear this directly rather than circuitously. That sentence alone changes the register of what follows. It tells the other person that you respect them enough to be honest. Techniques 9, 10, and 11. Ending unproductive conversations, following up, and asking for what you need. Not every difficult conversation reaches a resolution. Sometimes the most professional thing you can do is name when a conversation has stopped being productive. I do not think we are going to resolve this today. Could we agree to come back to it when we have both had time to think? That is not withdrawal. That is wisdom about when continued conversation makes things worse rather than better. The follow-up is the move that most people skip. After a difficult conversation, most people want to move on. The ones who are truly committed to the relationship go back. I have been thinking about what we discussed. I wanted to check in and make sure we are okay. That sentence costs almost nothing to say and is remembered for a long time. On asking for what you need. The most common version of this conversation is one where someone needs something and does not ask because the asking itself feels too vulnerable. The phrase that makes it possible is this: I have been hesitant to raise this, but I need this specific thing, and I think I need to ask directly. The acknowledgement that you have been hesitant to ask is disarming. It makes the ask human rather than demanding. Technique 12. The language that keeps the relationship intact. These are the phrases that do the hardest work in any difficult conversation. They are not the technique itself. They are the frame around the technique. The reminder of what the conversation is in service of. Before the hard thing is said, or after it, These phrases hold the relationship in place. I am raising this because I care about our working relationship. I want to be honest with you because I think you can handle honesty. I am not attacking you, I am addressing the situation. And the most powerful one of all, whatever comes out of this conversation, I want us to still be okay on the other side of it. That last sentence said before the difficult thing changes what the difficult thing means. It tells the other person that you are not trying to wound them or win. You are trying to clear something so that the relationship can continue on honest ground. Most difficult conversations become less difficult the moment both people are reminded of why they are having them. The difficult conversation framework. 4 steps that work for every type of difficult conversation covered today. Step 1. Open. Name the dynamic you want. A conversation, not a confrontation. Step 2. Observe. Use the SBI structure. Situation, behavior, impact. No evaluation. Only what happened and what resulted. Step 3. Listen. After you have said what you came to say, create space. I might be reading this wrong. Tell me your perspective. Step 4. Close. Whatever comes out of this, I want us to still be okay. This is not a rigid script. It is a shape. The specific words change depending on the situation and the relationship. The structure stays the same. Daniel and the pattern of exclusion. The conversation had been sitting unspoken for 6 weeks. Daniel's manager had been excluding him from key meetings. Not dramatically, just consistently. Each time there was a reason, but the pattern was clear. He asked for 15 minutes, and this is what he said. I want to raise something. I'm framing this as a conversation, not a complaint. I have noticed that over the last few weeks, I have not been included in certain key meetings. I might be misreading the situation, but I wanted to check in directly rather than assume. His manager was quiet. You are not misreading it, she said. There has been some uncertainty about the restructure, and I handled it badly. I should have talked to you. She had not known he had noticed. He had not known she was aware of the dynamic. 2 people talking around something for 6 weeks resolved it in 12 minutes. Not because the situation was simple, because he found the words. 12 techniques. Let us run through them quickly. Opening a difficult conversation. Delivering feedback with the SBI framework. Setting boundaries clearly without over-justifying. Disagreeing professionally with and instead of but. Addressing relationship tension with openness. Apologizing genuinely with no deflection. De-escalating heated conversations. Delivering bad news directly and with care. Ending conversations that have become unproductive. Following up after the conversation is over. Asking for what you need directly. And using the language that keeps the relationship intact throughout. These are not soft alternatives to the difficult thing. They are the tools that let you say the difficult thing well. Your difficult conversation phrase bank. Screenshot this slide or write these down. These are the exact phrases. For opening, I would like to approach this as a conversation, not a confrontation. For feedback, in this situation, when this behavior happened, the impact was this. For boundaries, when this happens, it affects me in this way. I need this to change. For disagreeing, I respect that view and I genuinely disagree. For tension, I might be reading this wrong. I wanted to check in directly. For apologizing, I did this specific thing, which caused this outcome. I am sorry, genuinely. For heat, I am not trying to win this. I am trying to understand. For bad news, you deserve to hear this directly rather than circuitously. For closing, whatever comes out of this, I want us to still be okay. These phrases work because they are honest. They say the necessary thing without sacrificing the relationship. One final distinction, and versus but. I understand your perspective, but I disagree. The word but erases everything before it. The moment the other person hears but, the acknowledgement disappears and all that remains is the disagreement. I understand your perspective, and I disagree. The word and keeps both things true simultaneously. The understanding is real. The disagreement is real. Neither one cancels the other. This is a small change, one word, and it changes the entire emotional experience of being disagreed with. Use and in every difficult conversation where you need to hold 2 truths at once. Difficult conversations do not damage relationships. Avoided conversations damage relationships. You now have the language for every one of them. Subscribe to Fluent Daily for a new lesson every week.